So we can perhaps start with this session. We are a bit late, but I think it's okay. I would like to thank everyone for coming to the session. And is it okay with? Yes. So the session is a session that is organized within in the framework of a European project funded by the European Commission called iClimate Action. And we decided that with the organizing team that we'll have a session on with a title which is From Earth Observation to Climate Service, realizing the full potential of ECV data chain. I will be moderating the session. I'm Paolo Lai. I'm the coordinator of this iClimate Action project, which is a project involving GEO, the WMO, and GCOS, the group, the Global Climate Observing System program, which is a joint program of the WMO and other entities. So I think the session today will really be about, we are gathering more and more information, Earth observation data, but it's always difficult now to go to the end of the value chain. And we are acknowledging the fact that providing climate service is still a bit difficult. So the session and the project are really about essential climate variables, not, so we are targeting specific aspects of the Earth observation. So we'll be discussing this data value chain along the line of the essential climate variables. So the idea is from this project, iClimate Action, is really to better align what the WMO, GCOS, and GEO are doing along the value chain, and to provide high-level recommendations to the Commission on how to improve this Earth observation system and hence joint climate action, not only between the three organizations, but also with other organizations involved in this framework. So we will have first welcome addresses from our representatives, and I would like to start with Joanna Drake, who is the Deputy Director General of the Research and Innovation at European Commission. Joanna, the floor is yours for a welcome address.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and indeed a result of information overload, which of course, if we really want to give a service, which is what you started with, from data to service, then it is challenging of how to organize that and to make sure that we can actually be in such coordinating shall we say, style and fitness that we can actually deliver the service that we want to. So thank you so much for offering the slot to me to open this very important session. Let's start from the beginning. The European Commission and Horizon. In 2024, so just 2 years ago and less than that, we launched a call through the Horizon program, the Horizon Europe Work Program, to support the collaboration, first of all, between the three major international organizations dealing with climate observations, namely WMO, GEO, and GCOS. Going on to the why and the wherefore, the need for this activity became clear because we noted that there is a lack of coordination, first and foremost, and with that, a need to improve a more coherent approach to conduct and exploit climate observations in order to support international climate policy and diplomacy. The result of this was the project iClimate Action being born. This was awarded to WMO, which addresses the fragmentation with important actions. It addresses the monitoring of the uptake of the data and the provision of lessons learned. Also, the harmonizing of essential climate variables, ECVs, and demonstrating the science to services pathway through two demonstrators, and namely the Urban Heat Resilience Service and the Global Ecosystem Atlas. But let's put all this into a geopolitical context too, because there has been changes in the geopolitical landscape, which makes this project even more timely. Our capability to monitor global climate is at risk. Some governments, which have been major funders of global climate science and observation networks, are about to rethink their engagement and are considering climate change no longer as a priority. On the other hand, we have expert reports, incessant ones, which are based on observations like, for instance, the IPCC and the state of climate, and they tell us that the global climate is warming faster than ever before, and that has been a planetary emergency, but has remained firmly so. And on top of that, the evidence is more than overwhelming. So I'll just mention a few examples. Ocean surfaces are at record high temperatures, with marine heat waves increasing. Sea ice is declining rapidly in both the Arctic and the Antarctic. Extreme weather events like heat waves, storms, floods, or droughts are becoming more frequent and severe due to climate change in almost all areas in the world. And these are results that are uncontroversial and that call upon us to act. And of course, we turn to policymakers who need to know as precisely and in as timely a manner as possible what exactly is going on, how to be prepared to face the consequences that these changes have on our people, on our economy, on our safety, on our sustainability, and I would say on our preservation itself as a human race. A comprehensive global system for observing continuously and accurately is therefore indispensable. The project iClimate Action is very important, therefore, for us to help with coordinating international efforts towards this end and to convey the necessary messages to policy and decision makers in no uncertain terms. And therefore, I'm very glad that this session actually takes place today, and look forward also to interesting presentations and discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanna. I will give the floor to Véronique Boucher, who is the director, the senior director of one of the two departments at the WMO, the Science Services and Capacity Development. She will be representing WMO and also GCOS.
Thank you very much, Paolo, and thank you for the invitation to jointly open this particular session. And I would like to certainly thank the European Commission for supporting and funding the iClimate Action Initiative, which provide a very timely framework for the discussions that we need to have and improve the coordination. And also a pleasure to share the stage with Jana from the Geo Secretariat Director, and many of the partners that we have around the table today for the discussion. There is no questions. I think we all agree on the critical importance of Earth observation for climate action. More importantly, there is now a recognition within our users that of that same critical importance. And so the application extends much beyond climate action, but also to disaster risk reduction, adaptation, and sustainable development. The amount of data that we are now producing, thanks to many of the innovations, is unprecedented. And yet, and that's going to continue. We're going to continue to have satellite that increase resolution, and we are seeing more and more private sector contributing to the generation of new data. The challenge that we have before us, however, is continuing to transform that information into intelligence that we can really apply in the context of climate action or otherwise. And that remains difficult, and that's part of the coordination that Joanna was talking about. In addition to the amount and volume, which have practical solution to, we continue to see a fragmentation between all of the production, but also the platform that are used to transform those data and to channel that information into decision and intelligence. So we have to find ways to work across this particular paradox. We also have new elements. The environment itself is quite complex. It's becoming more and more complex with new technology, and I would be remiss not to mention the role of artificial intelligence and its importance in the context of both helping but also potentially increasing that fragmentation that we have in front of us. It certainly has the ability to help us navigate, automate the workflows and how we derive information and improve the access itself. But it also has some challenges with respect to allowing more or weaken interoperability, questioning the scientific continuity and trust. It also has as much capacity to open the access as it has to increase inequalities and leave countries behind. And we have to work within those challenges and finding the balance that it provides. And that's part of the discussion, and I hope that will be tackled to some extent by the panelists a little bit later. But this is why really the initiatives such as iClimate Actions are really important. It brings together GEO, WMO, GCOS, and through those entities, many European and international partners to help really connect the full Earth observation value chain. In the context of the work that we are doing within WMO, this is quite critical to do so. And we work across a broad spectrum from research to operation to service delivery. And we continue to see how helping to connect the scientific observation into actionable information is really supporting our members and our communities worldwide. But it does require rigorous discussion, rigorous implementation, and the development of joint standards and understanding across the various users as to how we really derive all of the information that is feasible from the raw source that we start from. And so international organizations like ourselves have an important responsibility here. And we must continue to provide the space for the coordination on governance, on standard, on interoperability, on architecture, and on a strategic alignment. For us at WMO, it really linked to the broader mission that we have, including early warning for all initiative. We're protecting population and strengthening the resilience across all of the members internationally really requires that we continue to observe the Earth system in all of its complexity across the atmospheres, the ocean, the land, and the cryosphere, and to ensure that this information becomes accessible and actionable for all countries. So I do want to conclude and leave the floor to Jana and then the panelists, but I do want to remind ourselves or confirm the full commitment of WMO to working within iClimate Action across GEO and GCOS and the many partners. and ensure that we strengthen this collective international efforts with that process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Veronique. And I will now leave the floor to Jana for the last words on behalf of GEO.
Thank you very much. It's really nice to meet you, Veronica. Thanks to everyone for being here, the GEO Symposium, and in this room at this workshop. If you were with us in the morning session, we concluded it with a discussion about partnerships, right? Modalities of co-designing, co-creating programs within GEO and different operating models that advance us across this value chain. And this conversation really fits very much within that context. Gives me an opportunity to, maybe for the first time, to put into words what I felt about this iClimate action from the beginning, because it truly is a smart design. I'll take us back maybe even before the Horizon program, and that's 20 years ago when we were GEO created as part of the hosting arrangement with the WMO. So we have 20 years of history with the WMO, and there's always been a realization about the complementarity and alignment of our missions, obviously. And we have, it's not to say we have not collaborated with WMO. We've certainly done things collaboratively together, but perhaps never to the depth and with the kind of intention that really gets us farther down the value chain. And I think it's because coordination is one of the hardest things to do. It's never for the lack of will, it's never for the lack of aspiration and ambition, but every organization is funded to implement its work program, right? And so when you come in with an idea to collaborate around something that makes total sense, but it's kind of new, you sort of say, it sounds great, but we have no resources to do this. And the ingenuity of the iClimate action is in that it provided the incentive with the investment and the structure. And I don't think incentive, investment are dirty words. They do need to be spoken. And that's really what this decisive action by the European Commission put on the table. And it, from the start, forced us to think about the application of ECVs in the context of meeting policy mandates. The grand scope was very concrete in terms of asking us to connect observations and science to policy mandates. And that became our sweet spot within which we identified our work packages that are indeed looking at the implementation of essential climate variables, which is that robust science that WMO, GCAS bring together, and translating them into services such as monitoring the health of biodiversity, of ecosystems in the country of Maldives. How do we actually, there was a question upstairs from South Africa, right, about how do we actually determine the impact of draining wetlands in order to, or using them for mining sites, right? What is going to be the ultimate impact? We need to think from the services that we get out of those ecosystems, right? And we have, they deliver economic value. So if we account for losing or gaining in services, we can actually imagine policymakers looking at the balance sheet and perhaps deciding how much further can they push on the mining and extraction, and when can they really, when should they kick in restoration efforts. All of that we can do only if we actually use the information from climate observations in creating models that can project and forecast ecosystem services. And this grant, iClimate Action, it has given us the space to create partnerships within our three organizations, but also with the UN University, to work on these types of demonstrators that can then create reproducible and repeatable models for other countries to independently plug these observations, these models, the science and methods into their national context and make informed decisions about sustainable use, restoration, and conservation. So it's truly a 3-year opportunity, but the outcomes of this collaboration, if done well, and we will do it well, truly can unlock decision-making that goes way beyond the very narrow kind of scope of the work packages that we've set up in this grant, in this iClimate Action. So thanks for paying attention. I personally do think that iClimate Action is one of the better models out there for co-designing, co-creating partnerships. And I hope other members who are here watching and listening will consider it as a model to help support coordinated action by organizations into which you already make investments across the board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the three for the welcome addresses. I know that you have other duties. So what I will do now is to call our panelists on stage. So I don't know, you're welcome to stay, but not at this place. First, Monica Miguel Lago from ERSC, the European Association for Remote Sensing Industries. Second, Mark Dowell from the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, also representing CEOS. And last but not least, Osamu Ochai from the Japanese Space Agency, JAXA. And before we start, we would like to involve you in this discussion by opening a Slido, or whatever we call that, where we will be asking your views before we start. That may help our panelists to adapt their answers. And I will leave then Martin or Ludivine to explain how things are organized with the Slido.
1 second. If by magic QR code is going to appear on the screen. Let's see. So you should be seeing that. No. Just 1 second.
So in the meantime, I will continue with my short introduction. You'll have the QR code very soon. So the idea to the message to my panelists and the topic for the discussion I introduced already, but it is really about the amount of observations we have. Keeping in mind that this is true from some parts of the world, not everywhere, where there are still places where we are clearly missing information. But so overall, it's a success. We have more information now than ever before. But at the same time, we are asking this observation to be useful for societies, transferring the information into services. And we know that for many aspects, we are struggling a bit with this combining information from different sources into a complex realization of services for society. We know that today it requires technical skills, a clear understanding of where are the data, who is providing the data, and we know that we are facing also information that are not always standardized. And this makes things extremely difficult for the users. So the session is really with a question, we have a lot of data, but still not easy for users to turn it into useful information. And we need to understand why do we have these difficulties and possible solutions. Obviously, we're not going to solve problems within a 45-minute session, but I would like to focus on 4 topics today. Data space, data hubs, are they useful? The international landscape, how do we know that this project is funded by the European Commission, but it is an international project. And we know how to discuss governance. We know how to, we must know better how to improve the governance, how to see where are the players, what we can do for this large ecosystem. We know that we have to talk about better aligning standards, responsibilities, acting in this bit fragmented framework. So I don't know if we are ready with the QR code. Yes, we are.
Should work.
It should work. So you scan this and you will get to Martin.
Yeah, you should. Is everyone seeing the questions? No. Okay, that's not a good start. Okay, we'll continue to try. I'll keep the QR code on the screen
Okay.
and we'll
So-
come back to that.
Very good.
Okay, thanks very much, Paolo. And maybe to start, I should say I'm generally a glass half full person. So I think in response to your final question, I would say federation, definitely. I also think it's useful to look back, sometimes to look forward, at least on the space-based Earth observation activities. We already started to think about these things about 15 years ago, and actually together with both the WMO and GCOS and CEOS and CGMS, we came up with this climate monitoring architecture from space in 2011, which really was the basis of a lot of the coordination activities that has happened, at least for the space aspect since then. Why was that possible and why was it successful? I think for two reasons. One, there was a process in place. GCOS had this iterative cycle of implementation planning, status reporting, adequacy reporting, and there was the ECVs as the basis for that. So the space agencies were able to coordinate themselves and do this. Also, now if I can put my Copernicus hat on, that was extremely useful for us when we started to implement the climate change service, which was a new service in the early 2010s, because it provided us that structure to do that. So what are the implications now for the future? Well, it's exactly what you said. Even in the climate monitoring architecture, we recognize that the value chain was the framework that we needed to map ourselves onto. And let's remember, a value chain is not just about mapping information flows, it's also about mapping the stakeholders who are involved at each step of that and making sure that the linkages is there between them. So what we need to do now is really think about how we extend that value chain more and more to what we call the last mile or the last several kilometers or whatever, but which seem like a very long last mile at some points. But anyway, and to build up those linkages more and more from the level we're at now on the ECVs and certain core services towards more and more downstream services. And there are four aspects I think are important on this. One is to extend the whole requirement and needs gathering process, which has now been focused on the ECVs, to more the downstream aspects of that. Now, that's not easy. We know there are as many users as there are requests, more or less, so we need to find a way to frame that. And we also need to think about how we deal with the multi-scale aspects of climate services, which are there at the international, at the regional, national, and local level. Each of those have their requirements and this. I think there are some kind of opportunities out there. One thing I'd like to flag is many of you will have heard that at the last COP in Belém, They accepted the global goal on adaptation, adopted a set of indicators that could be used. And to me, that is one avenue. Indicator frameworks are always one very elegant way of structured response from multiple national and international members to provide data and services for that. So I'm encouraging colleagues to really engage with that process and think about how we can provide these integrators in a systematic way. And then, since we're looking on a 10-year horizon, and to be quite honest, if you'd have asked us 2 years ago with the advent of new technologies, AI, I'm not sure we would have even been able to make the judgment for today. But I think thinking in that context of emerging technologies, AI, and elsewhere, the other thing is we need to think about the interfaces we're building on our data to the different user communities. It's almost like we could think of a service on demand. You know, I'm a specific user in a specific region. I want to combine these type of different climate data records, and I'll be able to generate myself basically a dedicated interface and service. So I think we should be thinking in that mindset to address this issue of scalability, which I admit, based on the number of different types of demands for climate data, is going to be tremendous over the next 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And I think your last comment will be the topic of my second question. But I will take your comment on artificial intelligence, and I will turn the question to Osamu to ask what, from your point of view of a space, one of the big space agencies in the world, how do you see the future, and how do you see the fact that we have more data, we'll need faster exploitation of data, and how, from the point of view of your organization, how do you think we can preserve the scientific robustness, the continuity and the trust on the data we produce? Again, with a vision of 10 years from now, with the fact that we know data will be coming from different places and difficulties to assess their value.
Thanks, Paul. First of all, thank you very much for inviting this important event. Actually, I really like to, try to work with CEOs, GO, WMO, GCOS towards for the climate actions in the future. So this is must. Actually, as Yana mentioned, it has not been happened well in the past. Now it's a time, because I'm from the space agency. So let me just introduce about the space agency data sets, and then in terms of the climate action. Usually you might know that the climate, in case of the climate, you said about we need the data for 30 years. You know, as you may know, all the meteorological agency, they said about you need the data 30 years at least, so that we can discuss about how the climate change is happening. What about the satellite data? We are now almost ready for providing the space-based data. As 30 years accumulated data sets is now almost getting ready in various space agency. For example, in JAXA, we have our observation activity has begun almost 30 years. And then our satellite series is continuously, some satellites fail, some satellites just have some small gaps between the data sets, but accumulation of the data sets is now getting almost 30 years. So we feel, but by the way, that's for NASA, Landsat has almost 40 years. MODIS, NOAA, BIOS, that's kind of a multispectral radiometer series is almost more than 30 years. So from the space-based point of view, we are now ready to cooperate with in situ community to conjunction with the integration of the data sets to provide some sort of a consistent data set climate change. So for me, this is the time is ready. And then furthermore, we are now starting to integrate it to the model. So in JAXA, we are now starting our project to integrate it, our satellite as an initialization information for the model output. That makes much more precise information to improve their model activity in the future, both short term and also the long term. I think for the next 10 years, as you mentioned, this project should be run hopefully that more precise forecasting information to be provided by integration between the Earth observation data sets with the model forecast in the next couple of years for the initial improvements, and the next 10 years, we can have more operational usage. This is my really optimistic view, but I think this should be done not just only for the national cases, but also we need some guidance for the geo cooperation framework, geo WMO GCOS. I think this is very important to how the international arena can give more encouragement of this type of integration between EO data, model, and in situ is highly, strengthen about our both international and national activity. So that's my stop. I'm stop here.
Thank you very much. And I will turn to Monica, taking also the message from Mark about the last mile. I mean, you're representing a bit the end users and the private sector. And I would like to have your vision on how things will evolve. Do you think that these climate services will become a commercial market at some stage? Or do you feel that it is already a commercial market? What do you see the role of the private sector also in the governance? Mark mentioned and Osamu mentioned the fact that the current system was discussed 15 years ago, perhaps without this private or the commercial aspects that we have now. How do you see the future now from your point of view of, yeah, you can tell.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you also for inviting ERSC to be here. So for those which doesn't know the association, we do represent the Earth observation value industry in Europe. And having said that, and also reflecting the half glass of water, maybe I will also be in that direction, because the companies could be users of climate essential variables data, but could be also providers. The sector has extremely grow exponentially in the last years. We have been seeing this process from 10 years ago or 11, and I think it's about 10% of the growth in the sector, which means it's not only value-added service companies, but also data provision services. So we do have today emissions that are coming from the private sectors that are deriving land surface temperature, for example. So this is coming from the private sector. So it's just to put the situation that private sector is not only in the last mile, it's also approaching in the provision of data. But having said that, as a EO value-added company is a representation, we also have this half vision. No? There is companies that are very used to work with essential climate variables, ingesting that information into the models, but delivering this intelligence to the users. But who are the users? For us, they are other users that are maybe the municipalities, the local authorities, or the regional authorities. So these are the ones that our community is serving as users. In this context of essential variables, I think our community is also a user of such a data. And they have, from what I see, they have this complexity sometimes of acquiring this data, because it has been mentioned this morning about the standardization or harmonization of the data sets, interoperability. So these things are already in the process, so I'm glad to see that. But there's still a lot on that direction. But maybe Mark was referring about the last change, no, the last mile. I mean, it's kilometers, years. I mean, I don't know how to scale that. But I know that there is a lot of adopters now in the local dimension. When I think, climate is not only about global, it's also big localized. And our members, for at least our companies, are serving directly this local dimension. And I think for that, it is very difficult to put as one variable that could fit equally to the multiple globe. I mean, it's completely different. Also because the localization is driven not only about this particular variable, it could be also the social dimension of that city. It's different to work with agriculture population, that people that is living on the coast. So there are certain variables, I will say, that adding into that other variables, which are more technical. So the last mile for us is not only in the technical scientific part, it's really, I think this morning has been said about this socioeconomical component and the geography mindset thinking in a holistic approach. So I think we will get there. We have early adopters, so we are optimistic in this sense, but it's true that companies also, they need to do a kind of re-skilling or upskilling to the new dimension of the variables. The companies are very focused on the target, but when there are new data sets, they need to re-skill and upskill. And I think education on that direction or re-skilling and upskilling in the workforce is something that this community should take into account. And then this process upskilling and skilling, you need to develop that for the user. So it is always a kind of awareness, training, back and forward, but I think we are there. So in an optimistic point of view, yes, industry is adopting this to deliver evidence or impact, and the localization component I think is very interesting to take into the table because it is difficult to work for standards, interoperability when you are really thinking in Europe, I don't know how many, 90,000 local municipalities. So the scale is also interesting to take into account. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Before we go to the second part of this panel, are we ready with? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, third time lucky. Now, if you try the QR code, you should see a short survey about the journey from observations to climate services. Hopefully everyone starts nodding. Yeah, excellent. And so we can diffuse. Do you want to look at these live, the answers, or do you want to come back to them?
Well, it will take some time.
Yeah.
We can put that as in the
We'll leave
the
this up.
screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. The same question to Osamu then. We see that we are under also the project of the European Commission, developing a number of data hubs. We have several in Copernicus. We have projects that are offering platforms for working with the data. There are many of them. There is the European Open Science Cloud. There is different initiatives. What is your opinion? Is this creating new opportunities or creating problems?
Well, first of all, looking at this, I think there's a lot of half-empty glass people in this room, but never mind. Well, first of all, before I get to the specific platform discussion, just a couple of other general points, I think, on kind of the disconnect of where we are now and where we want to be going. I think the first is both in geo, and I know this is also a kind of the philosophy in WMO as well, this whole idea of research to operations. I think we have made a lot of progress, but we still haven't solved this completely. At the moment, we're having a discussion in Europe in the context of Earth observation activities in Europe and in Copernicus, together with colleagues in DG DEFIS and RTD, together with the broader Copernicus community, to define an update to a strategic research and innovation agenda that will be ready for the next framework program starting in 2028. And there, what we hear as we're starting to consult with different communities is we need to find additional mechanisms and tools to ensure that elegant transition from all of the incredible research that's been done into the operations and sustainability pipeline. So I think that's the first point. Of course, if I can give a positive aspect to that, in Copernicus, one thing we have that I think works well, and I think could be also transposed at the global scale, is this idea of core services, where we generate core service outputs and products that are already providing a certain amount of systematic processing and assessment, and that you could use as a basis to start to develop downstream services, last mile applications on top of. On the platform specifically, since you asked about that, I think there are different platforms in Copernicus at the moment, it's true, but I think in honesty, we're at kind of an early phase in, well, early may seem a big thing, but at least over the last 10 years, there's been a number of occasions where we have rationalized the data platforms and interfaces to data. And gradually, we're kind of converging to something which is becoming more and more integrated, or not necessarily integrated, but at least federated. And I think that's the key. I think we can't force integration for these data platforms and services, but we should be encouraging federation between them. Just two other points. One is, well, two and a half, I guess. One is linking to something Monica said. We can't expect that the ECV product requirements are the only source of requirements that are provided to data providers in their efforts to generate products. And in many cases, we have to find a way, and I know CEOS and CGMS have on different occasions suggested this to GCOS. We need to find a way to provide still a rigorous definition of requirements, but across different application areas, because only in that way will we get a structured approach to generate products and services. And one way of doing that is basically reverse engineering the value chain. So we shouldn't be thinking of the value chain from observations to delivering a product, but we should be thinking of it the other way around. What are the decision making and policy requirements, and how do we work our way back through that to this? I think, well, actually, just one addition to that, there are success stories. One example I would like to give, and I'd like to also link that to what another point Monica was making, is what we did in Europe for the greenhouse gas monitoring capability. So back in 2015, in advance of the COP in Paris, we decided in Copernicus that we had a gap, in that we didn't have really any dedicated activities for monitoring greenhouse gases systematically in the context of the operational program. Of course, there were research expertise in Europe. And so we put in place this, what is now called the Copernicus CO2 MVS system, which is basically a fully integrated data simulation system with a constellation of satellites and all of the ground segment and infrastructure required to underpin that. But we started from those original needs that we knew were going to be there in the context of the Paris Agreement, the global stocktake process, and all of this. And we worked our way backwards through the value chain to address that. And then we said, this is not something we can just do as Europe alone. We need an international collaboration. So first we started discussions inside CEOS and CGMS on how to collaborate on the space segment. And then in discussions, of course, with with the WMO, which then resulted in the creation of G3W as the framework, not only for the observations themselves, but for the data simulation systems and output products on top of that. So if we could replicate what we did there for greenhouse gases across all the different areas of climate observations and services, I think we'd be in a very good. I think that was a very structured approach to how we set up this mechanism, and I think we should replicate that. And my very last point, I know I'm going a bit over time, Paolo, is just to say, I think the last problem is what I would call constituency locking. So the WMO and its members obviously have very well-defined set of constituents, the NMHSs and their users, and climate service development has often been thought of in that context, and that's excellent because the NMHS is a very structured setup and how they deliver products and services. What we're seeing increasingly is more and more is that these requests for climate services are coming from extremely broad range of requirements. And I think in climate action, this link between WMO and GEO is good because GEO has members and principal representation, which come from a very broad range of ministries. And I think that diversity, although perhaps not as structured as in the case of the WMO with the NMHS implementation, is something that will, in the long term, really bring value to creating targeted services for different categories of users. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. And I'll just transition to you, Monica, because I think perhaps you can comment on the fact that, you know, what Mark was mentioning, starting from the end of the value chain and the user requirements. Perhaps this is typically where you have something to say.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Yes, it's user requirements, but still the definition of the users also is important. From the final user requirements, I believe that this is definitely, and has been said this morning about the co-design, collaborate with the users in an agile approach. So you get the requirements, you inject it into the discussion of the essential variables, how the implementation will be. The problem is the implementation. I think we are very much evolve somehow in the technical, scientific diversity of the data, how it's integrated with other dimensions of the data, and that, but the implementation itself, I feel that is the crack. And for implementation, and I think it's something that I noted from, I don't know where, but I think it was Jana before, making about the financial, don't be afraid about the investment or incentives. Maybe this is in the scientific community, is a kind of pushing back, or even the companies are like you are going to make money, but it's really the truth. I mean, you need to work with a co-design approach. Even people from as a civil servant, they need to take the time to invest into providing the comments, why the user requirements, they need the time. So they need to be structured into the methodological approach. And maybe back to your methodology, I took a note here about the methodological fragmentation. It is also important that there is no one method that will serve though, just one single change, but there are multiples. But we need to work also in the methodologies. The success story about the greenhouse gas emissions is one that works. I mean, it's not about replication, but maybe take the things that are really working there. So the methodological fragmentation, I think, is apart from these platform fragmentations, I think is something that we need to take into account. In terms of the data hubs and the platforms, I think the community that they represent, they feel that they really is good because they improve discoverability, cloud processing, accessibility, all these elements. But when you get into the final users, they need to have that in a very simple way. So there is a kind of bridge that needs to be coming from the science part to the language of that community. And probably it's a matter of language approach about what are the user requirements, how you translate somehow from the policy report, what is the essential variable needed, and you transfer it into the technology, and then it's a kind of the two directions. No, they need to be connected in a matching approach. So I think that is important to take into account. And yeah, and I think I stop here because I have too many notes.
But can you comment also from your point of view, look at the poll, and you see that the single entry, these from the point of view of the private sector, and we know that the private sector may not have a PhD student available all the time to dig into where the data is. What is your comment on this? And then I will ask you the same question as Amu.
Yeah. I think it's very important that we think about I mentioned before about the reskilling and upskilling the people and have in the team multidisciplinary approach. And this is, I think, a trend that I see in the private sector, that they are not only looking now from technical guys or scientific community, they are really looking for socioeconomic people or economic people. Really, they have a multidisciplinary approach. So for them, obviously, when you talk about data fragmentation, and that is, I think, still there, but I think the methodological fragmentation, I think, is important. And in terms of skills education, training, I think within the sector, we don't need to take afraid that they are implementing courses for the people. I was in a discussion with someone from the energy sector, I mean, a big company in the energy sector, that he told me that he was taking on Sundays a course on Python. You say, well, yeah, but this is not your company providing that. I mean, we need to take into account that the sector is growing so fast. 2 years ago, Mark mentioned the artificial intelligence was coming, but we need to be flexible and to recognize that we are not able to cope all the knowledge. We need to feel and to discuss with the people, and the collaboration, the approach is probably dispersed, but I think that is something that is important to feel. Skills training, and don't be afraid that recognize that we need to move forward. And data fragmentation is something that maybe, in the companies they are not that, but maybe another company they do synergies also with other elements.
Thank you, and I will for this topic, I will ask the last question to Osamu, and perhaps first question: what is your feedback? What can you comment on the results from this exercise? And then my question will be about AI. Do you think that AI will solve the problem that people are seeing today? What does it really mean to have an AI-ready data set? What is from again the point of view of a space agency? How do you deal with these kind of issues? How do you foresee solutions?
Thanks very much. For me, this is also, I touch on Mark's comment about this is a long-standing issue. So every time it's more than 10 years or maybe 20 years, still we are discussing about metadata, how to harmonize interoperability, standardization, blah, 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 how the interoperability can be done through the CEOs, GEO, whatever. So we almost fed up. But I think we need, we can list about those problems. We have a problem about the platforms. We have a problem with metadata. We have a problem about the data standardization. Here is the result. But how this problem could be transformed to encourage about the solution in the arena of the international discussion. So this is very important. How we can change our mind. We cannot deliver those kind of issues to our issues, but how to transit to our new encouragement project or maybe activities in the international. This is, I think, important. We need to change our mind because data system standardization is a country issue. Like a European Commission, Japan has a lots of programs for the data integrations and also the standardization, data providing data hubs. But this should be implemented in the countries or the European Commissions or the US and so on and so forth. How we can accumulate those best practices in our GEO or sales arena to propagate to these success cases in your countries. So this, I think, is very important to just try to share about what is the best practices, try to facilitate encouragement in the international arena to better project implementation around the world. So I think we need to, this is very great mindset about problem to solutions in country problem to the international solution. So that may be one of the, this is just my idea. And in terms of AI solution, of course, AI Yes, and the AI-ready data is now under discussion. And then we called about the data lake, about this is raw data to be AI-ready data. This is also needs to be converted from a data lake implementation. And then we have a middleware, and then we have a kind of an AI interface we call the large language model, which is LLM, which maybe you can ask a Gemini or maybe Claude or something, and just a simple question to ask about where is the best rice can be cropped in Japan. So then middleware working quite a lot about producing, analyzing about the sentinel data, and then put out Tokyo is the best place in the rice. So that this is just an example, but this is an AI solution for the next maybe 10 or 20 years. In order to do this, I think we need a kind of a foundation model, AI implementation, like a large language model needs to be developed in your data hubs. So this is a new implementation. I think this is a new implementation, new costs may be necessary, but I think this is an AI solution is one of the great, propagate for the technology to not just only for the scientific level, but general people, citizens can utilize AI interface by using a large language model. So this might be one of the solutions. So I will speak.
Yeah. Very quick point, which is one thing that I was thinking about looking here at the answers. I think another thing which we should acknowledge is that the AI kind of revolution itself is pushing us to think more carefully about metadata standardization, about access points, all of these things. So it's driving us to perhaps be more structured in how we discuss with our peers in other data providers to make sure that we do this, because if not, we're going to miss the bus. I mean, that's the whole point. So it's that in itself is driving a lot of these standardization discussions.
Yeah, also on this, and I think I see much more often is about distrust, because there are many new innovation going through the artificial intelligence, but then the final user is about the trust. Where is the traceability of the data? It's not the need to know every single step to get the impact of that data into their processes, but at least to have this traceability where metadata is described in a proper way, proper manner, because maybe this user, they are just fine with analysis-ready data, or maybe not, but at least they need to find where the resources come. They really need to find now the trust. And talking with different communities, statistical communities, or people from the energy sector or insurance, they need to know where the data is coming.
And to continue this discussion, since this is the third topic that I wanted to address, the fact that we have to work at international level. And the question is, perhaps first to you, Osamu, where is the best place to discuss standardization, interoperability? Because what we see is that it's very difficult to discuss that at international level, and you may have more regional strategies than international strategies in place. That's easier to do. What is your opinion on that? Where do you see the fora for this kind of discussion?
That is a bit difficult question, because particularly for the Asia, and then there is some cultural difference between Europe and Japan in terms of the standardization implementation. Because European always kind of a ECV discussion, we sometimes just a bit tricky for us just whether we should follow with all the systematic ECVs variable, because we might want much more focus on the more topical, priority ECV such as precipitation or baby biomass should be much implemented first, not entirely. So this might be some Japanese way, just focusing on what is your country problem. Like a precipitation, we are severely heavy rain in the summer season, and then we have a lot of snow in the Hokkaido or some area. That is our national focuses. In that kind of situation, implementation standardization still are kind of affecting about the national interest. So in that situation, yeah, we of course participate in the standardization discussion, but how to align with the national interest might be one of the big issues too. And then, but I believe still that standardization should be discussed at the international level, because this is at least we should not lose about this opportunity for the discussion arena. Then people are going back to their country to discuss about, we have a lot of these domestic circumstances which cannot approve for the standardization. That's fine. We can just try to make something long-standing discussion dialogue should be continued. And then this should be more transparent. What is your problem in your country so that we can discuss about both Japan and European, what is the differences about this? This should be much more transparent. But this is not a perfect answer, but this is.
And Monica, what is your point of view then, from the point of view of the private sector, on this standardization? On the fact you mentioned that you're not only 5 minutes, but I was told by my boss Martin that I had 10.
Yeah.
So I'll, if you can stay 5 minutes more or 10 minutes more, that's perfect. You will still have food. You mentioned that it's not only about end users, the private, it's also about data provision. So what do you foresee, how do you foresee the role of the private sector in standardization exercises and these kind of things?
Yeah, well, standardization could be quite demanding. So it depends how the service, the private sector would like to use that data. If it is really to ingest that data into their models and then use that data with another data sets and integrate that to deliver this service, then they don't want to have spend a lot of time on understanding this. So someone needs to be really certifying that these data sets or this standardization is there. So they pick that information and they move the last mile. If they are involved into the value chains, certainly I think certifying the workflows, I will say, because certifying products is going to be very, very difficult because they are such a diversity of certifying possible products that if you need to go through all the process, that is difficult. So my question here will be, why not make the effort to certify the workflows, maybe workflow for greenhouse gas emissions or certify other types of dimension. So maybe it's vague, the question, because I think it's difficult to answer. Also, maybe like Osamu, it is difficult. But I think we are obviously the industry is in favor of standardized, certified activities. But then when it's getting very complex, it's just maybe to be a little bit more flexible in the context. I think we cannot make a lot of generalization here.
Thank you. And you, Mark, what is your opinion on who should define, where do we work to define standards? Who should be in responsibilities? And also, you're from representing a bit the European Commission and for the WMO side, Region 6. How do we make sure that we don't leave other regions behind? And I'm not talking about the Asia Pacific. I'm talking about places where they may not have all the capacity that we have in the richest regions.
Yeah, well, first of all, to be perfectly frank, we look to this building often to provide that basis for international frameworks for standards. But I'll also be frank in saying if it ends up due to resources, due to whatever reasons not being possible for this building to provide those, then of course we find other methods to establish these standards. And that's more, I would say, on the technical standards. I also completely agree with what Monica said. There are aspects as Earth observation services become more and more used in legal context. There are other aspects of certification and things like this that become important. That is probably not the role of this building, but someone else's to address this. And I think this, especially if we're thinking on a 10-year horizon, will become more and more important. So maybe one other, I think, positive example on standardization and to make the link to the private sector. So we've been discussing a lot on the downstream role of the private sector, but as Monica said, there's also a very active engagement on the upstream side of things increasingly. And I think, and Osamu is aware of this as well, but recently, for example, in CIOS, there's been an effort to think about how we can make better use of these point source missions that are used for greenhouse gas monitoring. So there's this general method that you've probably heard of called tip and cue, where you're basically using the wall-to-wall coverage that we have from the public missions, and then complementing that when we identify hotspots to zoom in with the high-resolution mappers. And there was an effort over the last 2 or 3 years in CEOS to define standards so that basically the commercial actors or partners could engage with us in a more transparent way. This is what we need. This is how we would combine it with our data. And then that provides. So I think that type of kind of standard setting, or at least guideline setting, let's say, is important. And then the last point is I come back again to this issue of the requirements. I understand that it's probably not feasible for an organization like GCOS, for example, to scale up to address all of these different things. But I still think, and this comes to Monica's point on workflow standards, that you could establish kind of protocols that allow other people to define user requirements for different application areas and different specific topics that could then be at least curated by the WMO or GCOS or by someone else. If you have a standard protocol others can follow, then you gather requirements and you put them in the same context. Yeah, and that's it. And then I just wanted to reiterate something Osamu mentioned earlier as well, which is CEOS as well has other activities such as those on analysis-ready data. And there's a couple of activities there on standards that are looking, for example, at enhancing the ARD specification so that it also includes elements related to stability, which could be used then more in the climate context, and of course the AI readiness of ARD datasets.
Thank you very much. I think I will skip my last part about the next steps to give the opportunity to people here in the room. If you want to ask a question or comment on what has been said. Well, I think we have a couple of minutes to do that. I don't know if any comments from your side. Yes, Franz.
Yes, I have a question regarding what you said earlier. I think this interface between space-based observation and in situ is quite an interesting one. You said space-based are now getting ready to actually start looking at climate series because you need at least 30 years. In situ also it's not always as stable as needed, and there are also issues. And particularly how these two things correlate with it. How can you really make sure, because I think the space-based needs the in situ to calibrate, to make sure you're not watching a drift in your instrument, but to watch a real trend in the atmosphere or wherever. And where do you see the critical points in this interface, or where we need to really work on to make this work as optimal as possible?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Thanks. And then from the space-based observation committee, as you mentioned about, we have in situ data necessary for our satellite data calibration validation. But at the same time, for the climate study, we need kind of an integration, both sides. And then in that sense, we need a kind of a more long-term data sets. And I think we need a kind of both project, but try to encourage more, both communities should be sustained. And the space-based community like a CEOS CGMS is quite a systematic way. As Mark mentioned about, this is a long-standing, more than 30 years, 40 years, I believe long. While the in-situ community is something a little bit sparse about not much systematic way. How we can get more synergized between the CEOS system into the in-situ. Probably this is also the long-standing issue, but we really like to maybe a joint project between the CEOS and the in-situ community under this framework could be one of the proposal, and then kind of whether this could be a space-based calibration project or might be more climate modeling activities. I think this might be one of the possible way to go, how we can work together between the space agency community with the in-situ community under this framework, if we need to discuss further about that.
And before you comment that, I would like to mention that the last meeting of GCOS was integrating people and committee from CEOS, Working Group on Climate, and the AI Climate Action people. So we try to do that. Obviously, that's just a single project and we need a bit more, but I just wanted to mention that. Mark.
Yeah, just to add on Osamu's response to France, I mean, First of all, of course, it's obvious that reanalysis is perhaps, I think, a primary tool that has shown incredible benefit in integrating the space-based and in situ aspects, of course, through data assimilation and integrated in the modeling. And just to give you, I don't think, has Vincent Henri arrived already? No. But they have recently done an economic analysis of the value of the products from the ECMWF delivered Copernicus services. And reanalysis was the highest value product by a long way. I think I estimated, I can't remember the number now, maybe Mitch, you can remember, but I estimated it basically would cover the whole, just that one product would cover the whole Copernicus budget dedicated to C3S over the 7 year of funding. So, I mean, it's a substantial amount of money. So I see that as a good way to bring the in situ and satellite communities together. The other point to make is that in CEOS and CGMS, we have now for the last 10 years hosted this ECV inventory. Now it's called the CDR inventory, but which I think now has over 1,000 products in it or something. So it's a very substantial. And we did early on in that process offer this infrastructure as well to the in situ community if they wanted to put their data records inside this inventory and that could be made available to the broader community. Yes, I think there wasn't a clear who is the owner of that task in a sense. You know, I think we were trying to discuss with WCRP and with GCOS to see the GCOS panels how we could arrange this. Obviously, we can't take the CEOS and CGMS agencies can't take the responsibility of curating the in situ data. We will provide the infrastructure, we will provide the methodologies, but we could never, you know, it wasn't clear who the counterpart was, I guess.
Go ahead.
It's really a quick one, but I think it's a good example because a couple of years ago was in discussion at the Commission, the carbon removal certification framework. There, in that moment, there was the questioning about the uncertainty of the satellite-derived data. A couple of years before, they understand that the uncertainty is not only in the satellite-derived data, it's really in the in situ data, it's in the model. So I think now calibration and validation with in situ data, that was the I say old term that is used only for that, but also now it's about uncertainty. Uncertainty need to be there, need to be clarified, need to be traceable, but it is not only the question about the people questioning the satellite-derived community, it's really questioning the model and other factors because sensors have also errors. So even if they are coming from the in situ side. So
There's always uncertainty.
Thank you very much. I think we have to stop now. You have the food waiting for you, but I would like to thank our panelists. Thank you very much. I would like to thank Martin and Ludivine for organizing the session and the European Commission because this is in the framework of this iClimate Action project that I invite you to join if you're interested. Osamu, I heard what you said, and you'll be contacted. But if other people want to be involved, we have possibilities to. We need experts to think about these kind of issues. So thank you very much, and have a good lunch and a good meeting. Yep.
Thanks, Paolo. Just to say, everybody, the sessions will commence at 2 p.m. Is this even what? You can. Okay. 2 p.m. Back where you need to be. There'll be nothing in this room till 5 o'clock, I think. But yeah, enjoy your lunch. Cheers.